Servus Männer, it's Red Pill Germany again. 1 week ago, something drastic happened in our German parliament in Berlin. Something that almost nobody is talking about, and that is by design. You are not supposed to know about it, you are not supposed to talk about it. And our glorious leader and her regime, they can hide these news very conveniently and very effortlessly behind this shade, behind this cloak of China bug crisis that we have right now. What happened 1 week ago, March 25th, in the German parliament is that all parties in the Bundestag, except for one, and I think you can guess which one, voted in favor of transferring fiscal power to the European Union. From now on, the European Union can take on its own debt, and the member countries, the member states, have to vouch for it. And I guess you can tell, I guess you know which country it will be. First and foremost, it will be Germany because it is the largest successful country, but also other Central European and Northern countries will have to pay for the corrupt and inefficient economies of the South. In today's video, I want to tell you what their plan is and where they are at the moment in their schedule, in their timeline. And then in the third part, I want to give some perspective and give you my take on the issue, as in most of my videos, of course. But before I start, I want to thank all my supporters and my subscribers. Like, share and subscribe, and if you like my material, especially support me and join me on alt tech platforms. The links are in the descriptions down below. If you want to help out my channel, you can also support me via PayPal, Patreon or Subscribestar. Alright, I reported about this already last summer. I will link those videos too in the info box. If I want to make it really brief, I can tell you that in the European Union there was always a divide between the North and the South. In the North you have more or less financially, fiscally responsible countries who try to not go into that much debt, and in the South, well, what can I tell you? You have deeply corrupt economies, a deeply corrupt political system. By comparison, of course, we in the North have these problems too, but to a lesser degree in comparison to our economic strength. Or in other words, I could say that Germany can afford a certain degree of corruption, while these southern countries with their weaker economies obviously can't. And this is why southern countries always wanted the European Union to be a welfare union, a debt union, where they can take on debt and Germans have to vouch for it. That is their idea. That is the idea of Draghi and Macron. That is what Spain, France and Italy and other countries, Portugal and Greece and so on, these southern countries, that is what they want. The northern countries, on the other hand, they want to keep politics and fiscal manners divided. They said that no taxpayer of country A should ever have to bail out taxpayer of country B because they cannot handle their business correctly. In fact, life expectancy is longer in the South, their work hours are shorter, they retire earlier, their efficiency is lower, and their taxes are lower. Germans have to pay more taxes and work longer so that people in the South can retire earlier. Or I can phrase it also a different way. Germans like to save money, people in the South like to spend money. And I'm actually okay with that as long as I don't have to pay for it. They can do whatever they want, but they shouldn't expect me to pay for it in the end. But this is exactly what is happening now. And they use, of course, as always, since 1 year, they use the excuse of a so-called pandemic right now, which is absolutely laughable because these countries always had this plan, they always had this on their agenda, and they were always producing a deficit, and they're in debt and they want our money, and it has nothing to do with a pandemic. It is something that they wanted for decades already. So they just use this as an excuse to get it through European parliaments. And in fact, the German parliament last week voted in favor of this bill. You can see here that all German parties except for the AfD voted in favor, and the Commie Party, well, they abstained from the vote, but that is for other reasons. They're not profoundly or not really against this plan either. And it is very peculiar that Angela Merkel's union parties, the CDU, CSU, and also the Liberal Party, they voted in favor of that. I mean, I'm not surprised that the Green Party and the Social Democrats voted in favor of that, but wasn't it just the CDU, the CSU, and the Liberal Party who, especially in the 90s, always told the German voters that in the European contracts there is an automatic mechanism that ensures that never German taxpayers would have to bail out other countries. That is intrinsically, even theoretically, absolutely 100% impossible. And now, look where we are. They are talking now about over 700 billion euros. Roughly half of that will just be a present, so a direct subsidy without any conditions, and the other half will be a credit that will never have to be paid back, obviously. In this paper, there is not any condition, there is no timeline, there are no restrictions. They can just defect and say, well, we don't really feel like paying back, and then we are screwed. We in Germany have to pay in full in that case, and that is exactly what they plan to do, of course. And now you might say, wait, this is just a one-time thing, I'm sure. This will not be a permanent thing. At least we cannot safely assume that. Well, it is the German finance minister himself who said that this should be a permanent thing. Our finance minister himself said this is not a one-time thing, this should be permanent. So there you have it. It is the Germans who now say that. And I think that German politicians who are not doing politics for the Germans, of course, they were just waiting for an opportune moment where they can get that passed. And that means they need a diversion. And this year we have the perfect diversion, of course. They can get everything passed because nobody is really watching other news anymore. Nobody is really reading what is going on. Everybody is just preoccupied with questions of, oh, do I have to wear a mask now if I go to the supermarket? Can I still go out after 9 p.m.? Can I see my family? Can I go to a service or not? Is that still allowed? So people are so traumatized and preoccupied with these things that they don't have the attention and the energy to keep up with other things that are going on. I'm telling you, 2 years ago, there would have been major opposition to that. There would have been demonstrations and protests, and parties would have lost elections and stuff. And now, it doesn't even register with people anymore that they just sold out the Germans to the EU. So I won't say that there is hope, but I will say that there is at least a little roadblock, and that is that our highest court, the Constitutional Court of Germany, has now ordered our president not to sign that bill after Parliament had sold out the German people, because they have to decide on whether or not that is constitutional. And it is no other than one of the founders of the AfD, who's no longer in that party. I reported on that many years ago, Bernd Lucke. He's one of those economics professors, so not a nationalist at all, but more a liberal guy. One of these guys from the anti-Euro days of the AfD party. And that does not mean that our constitutional court already decided against it. It just means that they cannot sign the bill until they have reached a decision. They haven't reached a decision yet. So it is more of a delay than a hindrance, I think. But already people in other European countries are getting nervous and they are threatening Germany. Macron is not amused at all about the fact that our constitutional court has the impertinence to question this bill. So what does that mean for the European Union? I think they want to transform the European Union more and more into an actual state, into an actual country. Because right now, technically, the European Union is something like the United Nations or NATO. It is one of these multinational entities or clubs that is dependent on membership fees. And at the moment, the EU, they cannot generate their own income. And the idea here is that the EU can impose taxes and that they can take on debt. And then the debt has to be repaid, of course, by the membership countries according to their economic power. And once again, Germany would be the main payer of taxes for these EU taxes or for the debt, for the EU debt. But at the moment, they cannot really do that. And the idea is that without any vote, without any changes to a constitution or to fundamental European contracts, they will just through the back door, in the hope that nobody notices it, they want to transform the EU into something like the USA, an actual federal state with their own federal taxes and the ability to borrow money. And this process shows us something. It is very, very clear. It reveals that the German parties that are in the German parliament, they are not pursuing, they're not fighting for German interests. They don't care about their voters. And this is not a statement against the parliament as an institution. It is a statement against the parties, because you can see that the political parties, the different parliamentarians, they haven't individually, according to their consciousness or their beliefs, they didn't vote like that. No. They voted as party blocks. And, well, that's true for the AfD too, I have to say. But it is very clear that if you are in the AfD, then you are opposed to these shenanigans. But in the CDU and in the FDP, those guys, they were campaigning against such a thing for many decades. And now all of a sudden, as a bloc, they vote in favor of that stuff. And that should tell you something about the nature of political parties. They are the control instrument. They are the tool that globalist powers are using to get what they want. They couldn't do that as easily with individual parliamentarians or politicians, but when you have a party organization that determines who can rise and who is kicked out, when you bundle this power, then you can very easily and very efficiently control the way in which you steer societies. And that, in my belief, is deeply undemocratic and very dangerous. And we see it at work live right now. It just means that for all those years, and this is what I predicted, this is what I said all along, the cucks of the center, the CDU, the CSU, the Liberal Party, they sold out their voters. They voted against what they pretended to be their core beliefs for half a decade. Or even longer. And now I want to talk even more generally, because what is that at its core? If you look at the EU or Europe as a system, and you look at it from the perspective of a globalist, what do you want? You want the people to be enslaved as much as possible, and economically that means they should be in debt. They should have high taxes, and they should have a lot of debt. And that means a lot of money needs to be spent. Now, unfortunately, in the center and in the north, you have these stupid people that need to be replaced anyway, because they don't like to spend that much money. They like to save for their retirement, and they want to give money to their children so that they can have a house and all these nice things, right? And they don't want that. They want consumerism. They want consumption and reckless spending right now. They want the people to spend even more money than they even have. And this is exactly what generally, of course, it exists on a spectrum, there are outliers, blah, 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 but this is the general mentality in the Mediterranean states in the south of Europe. They generally spend more than they have, and we in the north, we are a little bit more careful. We think about the future, we think about retirement, we save much more. So, if you could install a transfer mechanism that transfers a money surplus from the north to the south, you make sure that the people in the south are never hit by any feedback loops. They never have to suffer the consequences of their financially reckless behavior. And we in the north, we are the enablers of this reckless consumption in the south. So all the money we make, we cannot save for ourselves, but we enable and support spending in the south. So if you don't look at the individual country anymore, but as the EU as a bloc, then you have just maximized debt and spending, and in the end, liberty is gone. Because when people are in debt, they are no longer free. They become slaves, and whoever gave them that loan is now their master. And these are, of course, non-European people. These are globalist forces who try to dominate the European people via money and via debt. Alright, so this was my take on this matter, and once again, it is shocking how little discussion there is in the German public. Everybody is just so preoccupied with all this health scare and lockdowns and all these things that they don't even notice that a thing that Germans were very adamant about and they were really arguing about for decades is now just without anybody noticing, is just decided. So from now on, the European Union, or very soon, once Germany ratified this, and I have no hopes that our constitutional court will vote against this plan. I think it will be a delay, but it will not prevent it. I think this plan will go through, and then the European Union is finally like a federal state. And the member countries will have no power anymore. They cannot even manage their own finances anymore. They cannot decide how their taxes will be spent or how high their taxes will be. The EU can then just order money and they have to pay it no matter what. And by the way, I should add, the plan has also a very nice detail. It means if one of the nations cannot contribute to this emergency fund now that is under discussion anymore, then they just drop out of the finance plan and the next country in line will have to take over their part. That means if, for example, let's say Belgium says, well, I don't feel like paying, I don't think I'm able to pay, then Germany has to pay the part that Belgium should have paid, and Germany will just have to pay more. Yeah, that's the plan. And we all know that Germany, of course, cannot defect on this plan. They have to go through because without us nothing would work. And don't you believe for a second that our controlled parliamentarians will vote in favor of such a thing. Alright, let me know what you think about that in the comments down below. And I should add that I don't want to sound offensive towards Southern Europeans. You have a different mentality and that is fine. And this is exactly why I think we should keep finances and taxes and debt separate between our countries. Servus, Kameraden.